Thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz. Here's what we're looking at. Northwestern sweetens the deal to try and get its plans for a rebuilt Ryan Field past Evanston City Council, but opposition remains. And Mayor Johnson's $16 billion spending plan is set for a final vote tomorrow. Our Spotlight Politics team has a preview. And now to some of today's top stories. Workers at the Howard Brown Health Centers have kicked off a two-day strike. Several dozen of the clinic's employees picketed outside a health center in Englewood, alleging that labor negotiations with the company have stalled and that the company's CEO has engaged in what they say are labor violations. The workers are asking for higher pay, layoff protections, and more remote work options.
It is unfortunate that our leadership does not want to come to the table and bargain with us in a fair way over a fair contract. The things that we're asking for are very simple and they are affordable. They are more than affordable by our organization.
Howard Brown officials, meanwhile, responded that they've submitted their final contract offer, and it includes more paid time off, as well as more than $2 million in collective wage and benefit improvements. Meanwhile, workers rallied in the Loop today against sexual harassment in the workplace. The groups are calling out harassment they say is happening to low-wage workers at a handful of companies, including Dynamic Manufacturing, Pivot Bio, Los Tacos and Desserts, and Cafe La Petito. The groups, including Raising the Floor, say they have filed workplace harassment claims with the Illinois Department of Human Rights.
We're here to say that we will not tolerate gendered and sexual violence in our workplaces. We believe survivors. We stand with survivors, and we demand that employers do better to protect workers from abuse.
Mayor Brandon Johnson was on hand to welcome the newest class of Chicago Police Department recruits. The ceremony took place this morning, as it usually does, at Navy Pier. It commemorated the graduation of the last 4 classes at CPD, as well as new promotions of command staff, lieutenants, sergeants, and many others. Johnson asked the newest CPD members to uphold the principles of justice, equality, and community.
This is a great day for you and for the city of Chicago. Our entire city is strengthened by every single one of you who has dedicated your life to this career, to a career of service.
Best of luck to the new sworn officers. Up next, residents in disagreement over renovation to Northwestern's Ryan Field. That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Evanstonians, Northwestern fans, you have to wait at least another week to find out what's going to happen to that $800 million rebuild of Ryan Field. The plan was to have been voted on by the Evanston City Council last night, but Mayor Daniel Biss and 6 of 8 council members decided to table it for a week. Officials say it's to give the community more time to look at an agreement in which Northwestern has proposed to pay $157 million over 15 years in, quote, community benefits. So it looks like everyone may have their answer next Monday, when we thought we were going to have our answer last night. So what's one more week? And joining us are Jeff Smith, president of the Central Street Neighbors Association, longtime Evanston resident Robert Ornstein, who lives near Ryan Field, Perry L. Davis, vice president of the Most Livable City Association, and Reverend Dr. Michael Neighbors, senior pastor at Second Baptist Church in Evanston. We also invited Northwestern University to join us, but they declined. We are happy you're here to have this discussion. We have 2 that have been in favor, 2 in opposition to this up to this point. So I'll start with you, Reverend Neighbors. What is this extra week going to mean for the deal?
Well, I'm not sure what it's going to mean for those who are going to be placing the vote, but it will create an opportunity for residents in Evanston to learn more about the community agreement, which has moved from $100 million to $157 million. One of the things that I'd like to share, which I think is very important, is that I think that the agreement that the university has made with the city is unprecedented with regard to American cities and colleges and universities around the country. I'm not sure that there is another university university that has made that kind of pledge over a 15-year period to try to increase the infrastructure of a city. That includes affordable housing, it includes economic development, it includes community bargaining, and all of those issues that affect especially those who are most vulnerable in the community. That would be Black and brown and women and other marginal groups. So we're excited about being able to share the extra week and to talk more about the agreement.
All right, Perry L. Davis, the big concern here has not been over the stadium itself, but Northwestern's plans to have now at least 6 concerts, or as much as 6 concerts on non-football days at that stadium. Is that still your main concern?
Yeah, I believe that's a lot of the community's still main concern. We've always taken the stance of being good neighbors ourselves, so the residents in the area. If my neighbor wants to rebuild their house, we're perfectly okay with it. If my neighbor wants to host 6 wild parties with random people coming in and out at night, no, I'm not okay with it, and I think most people feel the same. But it's easy for people from other wards to disregard that aspect and how it impacts the community. In particular, I find that people who do not have young children are particularly unsympathetic to the issue, but a lot of the people in that area have young families, and we're all very concerned about having a huge influx of just strangers coming in and of the noise and how it will affect our children.
And Robert Ornstein, you do live near Ryan Field. You are cool with the concerts, although the city's Land Use Commission did vote against this 7-2. I mean, the final vote will reside with City Council. Is that a cause for concern that the Land Use Commission said this rezoning to allow the concerts wasn't the right way to go?
Well, first of all, to get some clarification on the Land Use Commission, their recommendation, that's what they do, they don't make the decisions, they voted 9-0 in favor of the new stadium. And to be clear, I've been in favor of the new stadium from a year ago when it was first proposed because I see the economic advantages of the new stadium. In terms of concerts, if that's what it takes to get the new stadium, I'm okay with that. And I think people in the neighborhood can use a calendar and figure out how to manage their time the way they do for football games. If they don't like how the traffic impacts them, why would you stick around in the middle of all of that? And there are plenty of nice places you can go to visit during concerts in the evening. Go to Old Orchard, you can go up to Ravinia and enjoy a concert. It doesn't have to impact you the way people fear it will impact them. I'd like to see a new stadium built.
All right, Jeff Smith, has that been your concern? Concerts, traffic management, security? Has Northwestern done anything to assuage those concerns?
There's been some moves, and don't get me wrong, I love rock and roll and I'm fond of my alma mater, but I'm also a fan of due process. And what's going on here is that the City Council is in the position of acting as judge on a petition to change the law. And there's always a problem when the person who's sitting as judge is making a deal with one of the parties that's before them on the case. So the Central Street Neighbors Association has concerns that residents be listened to. Our position is always, our philosophy is that the folks who are on the street closest to the action have the most granular view of what's going on, and it's just really a problematic place to put a stadium. Ostensibly, this extra week, does that give more time for residents to understand this agreement that the Northwestern has proposed with the city? Well, I think it gives both more time to understand and more time for input, but time to reflect on whether making a deal is the way you want to change law. I don't know that the City Council gets to 6 votes with the deal as it's currently structured. Reverend Neighbors, is there a better deal out there that could be negotiated in the coming weeks? You mentioned this is unprecedented in your mind, $157 million. Maybe there's more on the table.
Well, I think a lot of people are saying that. A lot of people are saying, well, let's go to Northwestern and ask for more money. So we're talking about an additional $208 million that has been set aside so that minority, Black and brown minority contractors and women have an opportunity to also be contracted in the building and the structure of the actual stadium. So if you add $208 million, $157 million, I think that the benefit to the overall community is absolutely prodigious. And again, to me, it's unprecedented. And our job and our responsibility then with the community agreement is to make sure that the university is going to follow every nook and cranny, that there is an actual community board that is ensuring that that agreement is going to work for everybody, but particularly those who are the most vulnerable.
Perry L. Davis, does this agreement help your concerns, or is it just all about the concerts?
I first have to say that when we're talking about the agreement, these numbers are completely skewed. People keep throwing around this $157 million. There have been many analyses that have suggested that there's only $2 million on the table per year that's guaranteed. All of these other extra things. Half of the stuff that they put in their memorandum of understanding or their community benefits are things that they were already providing, and they're just basically trying to get double credit for things that they've already done. I want to start there. The second is that I also want to emphasize that a lot of people, including some people at this table, were willing to take nothing. Absolutely nothing in exchange for this 4 months ago. So for these people to come back and say that this is the best deal we're going to get, that's what they thought 4 months ago. So I can't really trust the judgment of City Council, the mayor, or other people who are in support of this agreement. And as it applies to like what I think will happen the next week, I hope more negotiations happen. When we talk about what's unprecedented, they're talking about putting $3 million in the Good Neighbor Fund. They were already doing $1 million, but they stopped for 2 years because we stopped watching them and because there was no legally binding contract, which there currently is not. Legal experts have suggested repeatedly that there are a lot of loopholes in that contract where Northwestern can easily back out. And so if we're talking about like $3 million per year, Cornell University is the city of Ithaca, $4 million a year, with 80% of that no strings attached. Northwestern is offering $3 million, and they get to control where it goes as if the city is a puppet.
Robert Ornstein, are these numbers inflated? Is it not really $157 million, or can Northwestern manipulate that?
No, the way it's written now, that's the number. But in terms of how the document is actually structured, in terms of who has which rights over which things, that's moving day to day here. I mean, I saw something came out today where, university was given less control over 3 items. Now, did I do a deep dive into it? Did I sit there in a room today with all the documents? No.
City Council didn't either.
Pardon me?
City Council didn't either. Yep. And they admitted that last week.
Because this latest agreement came about 48 hours before the vote
Exactly,
yesterday.
and how can they?
Yes.
It's a part-time City Council. They have things to do over the weekend.
Yeah, so ideally it would be like finals week where you want to go in the basement of the library and just do a deep dive and get this thing to work. I'm in favor of the new stadium, and I have faith in our elected officials that they will do the right thing.
But this is a memorandum of understanding, Jeff Smith. Does this legally bind Northwestern to these commitments?
It says legally binding. It's buried down in paragraph 15. It's a contract. It should be called a contract straight up. Saying it's a memorandum makes it sound like it's a love note between two folks, and it's not really that.
It's a complicated relationship.
Well, there's a lot of credit being given for the monies that some that are already being spent on programs. $3 million could be clean money, but one big problem is that the people who are being the most impacted, the people with small kids who are going to be woken up and who can't go out to Old Orchard with them to, for 3 hours to chill, there's no specific benefit being given for the neighborhood. There really ought to be. If you're going to have a deal at all, there ought to be something earmarked for projects in the neighborhood that's had things like the library taken away.
If these 6 concerts really cause the disruption that Perriel, you're
Well,
saying
it's
you're
more than
expecting.
6.
And there's other events that Northwestern wants to hold there, by the way, that are not capacity, but
It could be 66 outside and unlimited up to 10,000 inside. You could have one every day a week if you were creative.
Reverend Neighbors, the vote to advance this a couple weeks ago was a deadlock, 4-4 on City Council. Mayor Daniel Biss was the tie-breaking vote to send it to the council meeting last night. Where do you think the votes are going to come down on Monday?
I think that the votes are going to be in favor of moving forward. I think there are going to be at least a couple of councilpersons who voted against it who are going to change their minds. That's my feeling and that's my sense, and that is my hope, because again, I believe that the advantages for the majority of residents in Evanston are going to far outweigh all of those concerns that have been raised. And I think those are valid concerns, but at the same time, that's why we sit at the table and negotiate and bargain and work. And I think that we do that in goodwill, and I think we do that with legal counsel at the same time.
Perriel Davis, what's your read on where the council members are sitting? It's an 8-person vote because one of the council members has to recuse themselves, so could this come down to another deadlock where the mayor is going to be the deciding vote?
I can't really predict the future, but what I do hope is that the City Council does take a clear look and realize the leverage that they have. I think that currently they've been acting as if they have to bend to Northwestern's will, but we have to remember they can't go anywhere. It's a university. It's not an auto factory that can go overseas. And I hope that they put the wishes of the residents who will be directly impacted up front, because all of the benefits that Reverend Neighbors is talking about, the whole rebuild and everything, we can have the rebuild. And there have been very few benefits tied to the zoning, and I hope they make the right choice about the zoning.
All right, so we'll know, as we said. Very, very quickly, want to make...
I just want to say, the university, you're right, isn't going anywhere, but they have to make a decision about football. for the next 2 years. And they have to sign a lease to play somewhere. We don't know where that'll be.
Be Soldier Field,
could be Geek Seats, could be part of Wrigley. They have to make that decision. And we don't want to give them the opportunity to turn that into a 10-year agreement, to leave us with no
starting
football.
construction next month. I'm sure that if they were actually considering other options, they wouldn't have.
So we thought last night was going to be the answer. It seems like Monday will be the answer. Can't really get delayed much longer than that. Everybody, thank you so much. I just want to thank you for joining us. Periel Davis, Jeff Smith, Reverend Dr. Michael Neighbors, and Robert Ornstein. Appreciate you joining us. And up next, the Mayor of Chicago, that is. His city budget is set for a final vote. Our Spotlight Politics team with what to expect right after this. All right, a lot going up north in Evanston, a lot going on in the Chicago City Council. City Council members are preparing to vote on Mayor Johnson's spending plan and the latest on a measure that would remove Chicago's sanctuary city status. That's on the table as well. Former Alderman Ed Burke's trial could finally resume this week following a COVID delay, and many more items. And here with all of that are our Spotlight Politics team of Heather Sharon and Amanda Vinicky. Thank you as always for joining me, because you work here, so you have to be here. You have no choice.
But we also want to be
Of course you do. Of course. All right.
Yeah.
So $16.6 billion 2024 budget. It really hasn't gotten much in the way of pushback. Is it going to clear the full city council tomorrow?
Sure. It's an easy vote. There are no taxes, no new fees, no service cuts, so everybody can find something that they like about it, which isn't to say that there haven't been heated backroom negotiations. They have. This debate has really been shaped by the cost to Chicago taxpayers of caring for the now 21,000 migrants who've made their way to Chicago from the country's southern border.
And so the original allocation for that was $150 million, which everybody pretty much universally acknowledges will not come close to covering the cost. Is there any modification on that?
Nope. The mayor says that he is sticking with that. There is no plan B, and that he is looking towards the federal and state governments to make up the difference. Whether they will do so, I think, is very much an open question. And what the city council will do if that money runs out, I think, is also very unclear.
Amanda Vinicky, to this point, the state has said, no, we don't have money to give you. Any indication they changed their mind?
No, I'm not sure it's really an open question as much as just not the answer that Johnson is looking for there. I mean, let's be clear here. You have already a lot going on in Washington, D.C., trying to figure out how to keep the government afloat and running there with partisan battles. So it's not as if I think you're going to see Congress saying, oh, Chicago, here you go. That isn't an option. And Illinois is on a different fiscal year. We're about approaching the halfway point, and there is not a ton of extra cash sitting around. Illinois did recently get some good fiscal news, another credit upgrade. This is great for Governor Pritzker, sort of a notch on his fiscal belt, but it is not to say that he's going to ruin that, therefore, by coming up with a bunch of money to give to the city of Chicago. So not any answers there. I think this is going to be something that perhaps the strategy is, first of all, you can get a budget through. It's first budget, no taxes. Worry about that when you have to.
Correct.
Maybe a supplemental spending plan or something down the road, or they're hoping
for.
for
Votes is a strategy.
Right.
Right. So Heather, speaking of all this, there's more than 21,000 people who've arrived in Chicago from the Texas border. Aldermen in the last several weeks have put forth this measure on, they want voters to decide whether they think Chicago should stay a sanctuary city. What kind of traction is this gaining?
Well, so this is part of the backlash to the huge costs and the very clear humanitarian crisis. There are conservative members of the city council who seem to think that if there is a measure on the ballot, it will allow Chicagoans to say, look, we no longer want to be a sanctuary city. But as I have reported, the city's sanctuary city status has nothing to do with the migrants, and it will not make any difference. And what we saw last week for the first time was 7 members of the City Council introduced legislation that would repeal the city's welcoming city ordinance in full, which is sort of where those protections for undocumented immigrants live in the city's code. So this is now a very clear and concerted effort to sort of change those rules. The issue is that we're hearing from immigrant advocates that this could leave Chicago's undocumented people in deep peril, especially if former President Donald Trump is reelected and he makes good on his threats, I think is the best way to say it, to deport undocumented immigrants.
There's just so much confusion here because as we've all made this point over and over again. There's undocumented immigrants, but then there are asylum seekers, which make up the vast majority of the folks that have been bused here in the last several months. Two different things. The protections for undocumented immigrants are access to services, and then Chicago Police Department not sharing immigration status with federal authorities, things like that. So that's what this would repeal, basically, if they chose to go that route.
Whereas the people who are here largely from Venezuela, seeking asylum, largely different sets of legal protections, and therefore not it, which I think gets to the point. However, we are talking about the specifics. So much of this is about just political posturing, and it definitely has consequences, not minimizing those, and in fact, we should not, because as Heather noted, this would mean a lot for a large, I don't know what number or what percentage of Chicago's population, but those who are undocumented, it has consequences.
I think
but
it's clearly
a
tens
lot
of
of
thousands.
this is certainly political posturing, and we're getting that as well. This whole thing, a lot of it is political posturing in terms of why individuals have been sent from Texas to Chicago in the first place.
Has
That's
permeated
federal politics.
this entire
Exactly.
process.
And it's not going to stop. Yes, the DNC
is
is going to be
coming
coming here, so
Yeah.
it's not as if even a repeal would change anything in terms of the rhetoric or the busing.
Speaking of politics, the ultimate Chicago politician, Ed Burke, his trial was delayed a week because a lawyer got COVID. So they really hadn't sat a jury yet. What's going to happen when they come back? How close are we to getting a jury?
Well, the judge says that everybody will be back at 9 a.m. Thursday morning and that they will pick a jury and they will hear opening statements.
Get it done, by golly.
I think that everybody who's observed the way jury selection has been going thinks that's perhaps a little ambitious, but we can't fault her for trying. Judge Kendall, I think, is very cognizant of the fact that this trial will last 6 weeks. That means that we are already bumping up against the Christmas holidays, and this case has been in the works for 5 years. It was 5 years ago this month that the FBI raided Ed Burke's City Hall and ward offices, and I think all sides are eager to sort of start to argue their cases.
Speaking of juries,
I don't know about Burke. If I were Burke, I think I'd be like, all right, let's just wait. I'll stay home.
What's another week?
Stretch it out.
I would urge everyone to go online and watch the Week in Review from Friday, because we had a very interesting discussion on the psychology of jury selection, and they're asking questions like, what do you name your dog? You know,
What TV shows do you watch?
Right?
Right?
There's a different psychological profile
Yes.
for someone that would have a dog named Fifi versus a dog named Buster or something like that. It's really interesting. That never ceases to amaze me. Amanda, no more legislating from state lawmakers this year. They wrapped up their veto session. The House passed a bill lifting the state's moratorium on nuclear power plant construction in 2026. So what's
So
next?
the governor is expected to sign this. He was part of those negotiations, so it's certainly a change. This comes as there are a lot of questions about energy policy as Illinois looks to go toward all renewables. Will the state be able to meet that goal? Is that going to cause reliability questions, particularly in the downstate Ameren market? There's a lot of concern. It's not just Ameren, it also gets to the grid and MISO, but point being, reliability is a prime concern. We're also seeing cost questions.
You have
so
to
folks
explain
say,
MISO. It's not a
so
soup,
this is a
Amanda.
great, well, point being, it's reliability concerns.
Okay,
And
all
so
right.
that is what this is meant to address. But I also think it is sort of a signal to the business community who'd really been advocating for this. You're not talking about these monster nuclear reactors that you're accustomed to. These are called small modular reactors that literally would be small enough to be built on, say, a business site, a manufacturing, a college campus. And so there's interest there. But critics say, as you are rushing to do this, first of all, not a rush. It's going to take quite some time before a moratorium, it may be lifted, but it takes time to get this to happen. But there are questions, they say, about security. It's nuclear energy.
There are also a lot of questions about the scholarship program for private school tuition. That pretty much gone now. They didn't take any action on that to
No
extend
action on
that.
that. That is done, at least for now. Those scholarships will continue for this school year, and advocates say that they very much want to come back in the new session come January. Wouldn't happen right away, but they're hoping that they can negotiate as part of the larger budget piece and get something in there. I think that depends on how much fallout there will be for letting this program cease to exist.
Heather, we have 10 seconds. The Ethics Board dropped a complaint against Mayor Lightfoot. How come?
Heather's big breaking story, by the way.
Well, essentially the city's ethics ordinance does not apply to candidate committees. It only applies to candidates and elected officials. So the ethics board said, look, our hands are tied, and hey, city council, if you want to change the laws, that might be a great idea. I will have more on that once I get a
All
fair
right, so
session.
go tune into the website or click on the website. Heather Sharon, Amanda Vinicky, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
And that is our show for this Tuesday night. Join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10 for Chicago Tonight Black Voices. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe and warm. Well, it's not that cold out.
Great.
And we'll see you tomorrow.
Awesome.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is committed to supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives throughout the legal profession.